away. Welcome everybody. Again, happy anniversary. This is 5 years in, and just happy to be here with all of you. As we were preparing for this, I was thinking nearly 10 years ago, I was sitting on my deck in my backyard talking to Brian Pickett about this idea about needing a grants management solution for Salesforce. I work for the Council of Michigan Foundation and we're Association for Philanthropy. So I was seeing this, universal need from a lot of funders, talking about how they could use Salesforce, how it could be extended. But there wasn't anything off the shelf that they as funders or grant makers could utilize. And so just again, thinking back 10 years ago, just this idea or this spark of inspiration for something that could be. And this many years later, 5 years into the community putting effort into this product, we're here today to celebrate 5 years of building something really special. So just again, thank you to everybody who's been involved. Thank you for everybody who's deployed this, used it, taken a look at it. Just happy to be here today with you. So we'll get started here. So we're going to run through introductions. I'll hand it over to Nick in just a second to lead that. We're going to talk about the journey, more detailed on the history of Outbound Funds and talk about how we got here. Then we're going to discuss how all of you might be using Salesforce and Outbound Funds module. And then we'll talk about what the future looks like for this group. So Nick, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, greetings everyone. Excited to have you all here today. What we want to do here with kind of the group size, we'll have you all, you were going to utilize the Zoom world to have you all put your name, the organization, your role, and then how you use Outbound Funds. And I think, Bill, you also have a couple queued up polls that will be posted in there too. So be on the lookout for those and just kind of say your hi, calling in from. I'm calling in from good old Roseville, Minnesota right now. And while you all have a chance to answer those, kind of thought this would be a great time for us to introduce ourselves as kind of the co-leaders of this endeavor over the years. And so I'll quickly introduce myself, and then I'll hand it on over to the others on the team here to introduce themselves. So I'm Nick Lindberg. I'm from the University of Minnesota, where I'm the Salesforce system admin. And we use Outbound Funds for a couple of different purposes. We actually have some kind of internal grant processes that we're doing, as well as some new requests that came in the other day to track scholarships out of Outbound Funds. So those are some things that I've been using Outbound Funds in my org. So Bill, maybe I'll pass it on over to you and we can keep the chat going here on our end.
All right. Again, Bill Corkle, Council of Michigan Foundation. So again, we're Association for Grant Makers in the state of Michigan. We actually do some re-granting. We have some endowment funds set up through our members. We primarily use Outbound Funds to track that. And then we've just recently started a grant program in partnership with the Department of Natural Resources at the state of Michigan, and are currently just kicking off that project as well. So not quite the big grant makers as many of you are, but it's a perfect little use case for Outbound Funds. I'll hand it over to Brian, my longtime collaborator in this crazy idea I had.
Right. Yes, I was on that call with Bill. I too was excited about having a kind of grant making platform on Salesforce, and recognize between you and me, Bill, like we weren't going to make it happen. That was too much work. It's too large of an endeavor. So it was exciting for it to come to fruition kind of separately a couple years later. Brian Pickett, I run North Peak. We are a Salesforce partner to nonprofits and grant makers, and we really just love having choices for our clients. And so with Outbound Funds, we've been very connected to it because it provides an extra choice for how you can set up your Salesforce appropriately for your organization. I'll pass it over to Judy.
Hey y'all, I'm Judy Stone. My current role, and hi, I know so many of you. My current role is I'm a principal consultant at Beyond the Horizon, and we are also a nonprofit Salesforce consultancy. We focus on local markets of federated organizations, and currently we're implementing Outbound Funds in a lot of our projects. We varying use cases for how Outbound Funds was originally conceived as being more than just grant making. So there are a lot of outbound examples and we're incorporating it. My prior role was I was open source community manager at salesforce.org when Outbound Funds was born at a community sprint, which you'll hear a lot more about shortly. And I guess I'll pop it over to Kim. You're next to me in the list.
All right, thanks, Judy. Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Shafkis. I am currently at a for-profit where we don't use outbound funds, but in prior life, I spent a lot of time in the partner world, was part of that early team who built out outbound funds. I'm excited to see how you all are using it today. And like Judy, I also worked at salesforce.org where I supported not only outbound funds, but many of their other grant management products as well. I'm excited to be with you today, and I will pass it to Sherry.
All right, I am Sherry. I am with North Peak Solutions. My title is Director of Professional Services, but really I would say my role is consulting with nonprofits and foundations. And how I use outbound funds, I have implemented it at several different client organizations. And in terms of my role with the outbound funds team, I was at the Sprint in 2017 when we first built Outbound Funds, and then I helped co-lead the community team for a few years as we moved towards today. So I think, Nick, was that all we were doing with introductions, or is there more? Do we want to talk about the polls real quick?
I think we'll talk about the polls. First off, thanks
Awesome.
for everyone being very enthusiastic on the chat here. I love seeing all the comments here. Let's keep that going here for the call here. In terms of the polls, it looks like we have a great mix of grant makers and consultants and IT or system admins, which is awesome to see. In terms of how we all found out about the outbound funds, it's another one of those good mix. I love seeing a handful of folks learning about this from the community sprints. Let's say over half of the folks found out from the Trailblazer community, and then there's a good old other category, which maybe we'll get to that later on, about how people all found out about this amazing tool. And then in terms of how we're using outbound funds, there's a whole, it's amazing the going back to flexible and nimbleness of the different use cases that we have here, everything from grant making to scholarships to nonprofit using for their funds. So I love this distribution. It wasn't necessarily like 100% anything but on our poll, which is awesome to see. So I'll kind of stop my part of it here, and we'll share. Is it on to you now? Is that right?
It is. It is. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of outbound funds. Bill, you are in control of the slides. I think you'll be able to tell when to flip them, but that is yeah. So let's go to the first one, and really we want to talk about kind of where have we been. It started, as Bill and Brian have mentioned, with a conversation they were having about this option for people in the community. And if you want to go to the next slide, Bill, the other piece that was happening, a lot of people knew about, is that people had started talking about it in the Trailblazer community as well. And at that moment, it was the hub. And there were some conversations that happened at a sprint in 2016 about how do we get grant making in NPSP. And that was kind of the basis. People were talking about it. We were talking about it in Minnesota at the time. Nick and I worked at the same organization, and we were talking about what other options do we have. And what happened in August 2017, we all kind of came together at a sprint in Chicago. That's on the next slide, Bill. There's a few great pictures of that sprint. We really came in, and if you'd ever been to a sprint back in the day, you did this like sticky palooza thing where people said, what do you want to work on today? What's working? What's not working? And there was a group of like seven or 10 of us that said, we really want to figure out how to make grant making work in Salesforce. We spent 2 days kind of infamously like debating the data model, and it was this loud group in the corner that didn't want to stop working to get lunch because we were so excited about this thing that had potential. And by the end of those 2 days, we actually had the data model that you actually see in Outbound Funds today. We had a working demo. We had everything kind of in place. something I often joke with my clients about. Like, why is the requirements object just kind of this thing that collects all of these different things? Like, it could be your application, it could be your grant report, it can be anything. The real reason it can be anything is because we ran out of time at that first sprint and we said, I don't know, we use campaigns for everything. Let's just call it milestones. And then it got changed to requirements. But that is what happened is we were like, this will work. And we just kept it simple. The other piece that I want to highlight is this. I think it was in Twitter at the time, but Sarah posted it. There was this moment where we were trying to decide, do we do custom or do we do something like opportunities? Because that's what Foundation Connect was built on. And we actually had this debate where we flipped opinions, and somebody who thought it should be opportunities said, no, it should be custom. And then we presented that to two people from Salesforce at the time, AKA Judy and Kevin Bromer at the time. And it just started out Outbound Funds in this way that we were open to all ideas and no idea was a bad idea. We just wanted to get it out to the best result. And it wasn't about who brought that idea. So then we get to the fall of that year. We were told after the sprint, that's not going to become it's not going to become part of NPSP. And I'm so glad that it did not become part of NPSP. But we ended up that fall just saying we're going to continue this as a group, and we kind of managed. Kim and I wrote the first version of the documentation at the time. I remember going back and forth on Google Docs trying to get that all figured out and kind of writing that the first time. And we spent that first year just kind of making it better. This is a post by Nick in the community saying, we've got it. There's something that's going to happen. We're going to do something. And we did a webinar in June of 2018 where we presented that to I don't remember the numbers, but it was more than a handful of people, and we were super excited about that. It really became this thing where once a month we were meeting together and really forming this community of people who cared a lot about the grant makers that could use Salesforce and how we could make it better, how we could make their worlds better. And then in 2019, this amazing thing happened on the Salesforce side of the world. This open source commons program started. Outbound Funds was really that first thing that happened in the open source commons. And it really gave us a way to become an official app. And that is actually what we're celebrating today. Bill, if you want to go to the next slide, that would be awesome. Because we were able to get through security review guided by Judy and others at Salesforce. And so we were able to become that security reviewed app. We could become this trusted app. Before that, people were like, well, you're like 10 people in the community. Like, can we trust it? Is it viable? Is it going to stick around? And by being a part of open source commons, we were able to say, yeah, you can trust us as an app. The pictures here are just a bunch of sprints that we did in 2018 and 2019. I believe the one in the upper right is actually one of our team meetings during that time. But we built things like a couple of Lightning Web components, and we refreshed our documentation, and we started giving like best practice guidance and things like that. Then in early 2020, right before the whole world shut down for the pandemic, we actually started conversations about Salesforce was looking to build an official grant making app. And so they came to us and they said, hey, we'd really like to make Outbound Funds our official Salesforce product, and we'd like it to be the basis for the first grants management app. Bill, if you want to go to the next slide, that would be great. And we basically had a lot of conversations with Salesforce, what that would look like and what would community involvement look like after that. One of my favorite things that came out of it becoming a product is this caricature of the Outbound Funds team in 2020. I don't know that we all look like it doesn't look like all of us, but it is kind of a fun memory of what that team looked like when we brought that together in 2020. Going forward from 2020, we spent the next couple of sprints continuing to build into outbound funds, and we kind of slowed down, mostly because Salesforce had kind of taken on the role of managing the app and moving it forward. But we were all still around. We still answered things in the Trailblazer community. We still were looking for ways to support the community. Nick, Bill, and I would chat ever so often and say, "Hey, like, do we have a role here? Should we start talking about this again?" And recently, we were like, you know what? Yeah, this is something that the community kind of needs to reinvigorate itself and start talking about outbound funds again. So that's what we're doing today. Um, I know that hundreds of organizations use outbound funds. We don't have an exact number from Salesforce at this point, but we know that there's a lot of us out there. And I think that if we go back, the whole journey has been about community, and being able to do that again, I think would be really exciting, and to just support each other as we're using outbound funds and see if there's a way to move it forward in a really super helpful and useful way would be amazing. I am going to pass it to Judy to talk a little bit about how outbound funds is being used today, and Kim as well. I think she's helping with that too.
So, yeah, as we were coming together and thinking, okay, how do we have a party together on a Zoom in an hour? One of the things was we wanted to make this more of a conversational experience, and we have some prompts of some conversation starters so we can engage with each other. But to kind of kick it off, next slide. All right, so we did kind of seed it with a couple of organizations that we knew were actively using outbound funds. And so, Amy, are you here? Ashley, sorry, wrong name.
Yeah, I'm
From
here.
Hexer.
Yep.
Hi.
Hi.
I said Amy. From Hexer and Fiona. Unfortunately, the person from Bush Foundation was not able to make this call, but Fiona from North Peak has graciously agreed to kind of talk to it. So Kim and I are just going to toss out some conversation starters, and how we thought this would go is I'd love for Ashley, if you could just take a second, introduce yourself and your organization, but we'll get to kind of the first question we teed up, and Ashley and Fiona can answer, and then we're going to give a couple of minutes if anyone wants to either raise their hand or post in the chat and kind of share their reflection and story. I'm really happy to see from the survey that went out, we're not all consultants here, not all nonprofits, and let's get the conversation going. So Ashley, if you want to say a few
Sure.
words of intro, and then
Sure.
you get a teaser.
Okay, so I'm Ashley Dunn. I'm the grants manager at the Hector Foundation for Children. So we are an invite-only private foundation. We exclusively do grant making in the United States. We're actually a relatively simple grant maker. Very straightforward. Almost all 501c3s, not 100%, but mostly. We just needed something that was clean, that was easy to use, that our grantees could use, because we were originally on Foundation Connect, and that I'm the only grants manager at my foundation. There's only actually 9 employees. So it's very, very small. We do about $15 million in grant making a year. And yeah, became very difficult for me to manage Foundation Connect. And of course it was sunsetting anyway. So it was time to jump ship. So I actually think I saw Brian do a demo with, I think, the Bush Foundation, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't quite remember, of their instance of Salesforce that I believe was using OFM. And I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what we need. Straightforward, easy to use, super user-friendly, close enough to Foundation Connect that my internal users won't be confused when they come back into the system. So yeah, that's kind of how we ended up on there. But yeah, so we're, again, like I said, invite only. So we have our grantees apply through a portal. Everything that they put in their application comes right over into Salesforce. Very, very straightforward. That's also how we do reporting for our grantees as well. Yeah, pretty easy. I mean, we just use it to really track our grants and our reporting.
Yes. And to follow up, Fiona, I know you're not directly from Bush, but anything you'd like to share about that organization and how they use it?
Yeah, so very similar to Hector. Bush Foundation was using Foundation Connect since 2016, and then with its impending sunsetting, they were looking for a replacement grant management system and chose OFM. So they use it to manage their full kind of soup to nuts grant making process. They use it to the funding requests for their applications, funding programs to manage their program level data. They do very rigorous reviews, so they use the review object for their review process. They manage their payments through the disbursement object, and then they do post-grant reporting that's required from their grantees. They manage that through the requirements object. So very similar to Hector, they use it for their full process. And of course, we added custom objects and some other things, but the foundational data model is coming from OFM for them.
Just balancing Zoom windows here. Fantastic. Is there anybody who is from an organization and has a different use case that go off mute or put in the chat just before we move on to the next conversation starter?
I see
Judy, I don't know if
Diana.
you-
Put what?
Yeah, I
Put
would
a-
say Diana has a great case that she just shared in the chat. So I don't know, Diana, if you want to come off, mute and share more. Otherwise, don't feel any
Sure.
pressure. You're welcome to leave it in the chat.
I also have a puppy in my lap, so just so you know. Oh,
We always
That means
love
you need
puppies.
to go off camera. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
hi. Yeah, I'm Diana Stockdale. I know a few of you. Judy, I've known for a while, and Caroline Renard and a few other people. Been around the Salesforce realm for 15 years or so. Started a new job last year. I moved to Hawaii and work for an environmental organization called Kupu, who received from the Biden administration a $20 million grant in their whole capacity thing last year. And of course, they've never been a grant making organization. They're very much an AmeriCorps organization where we had AmeriCorps kids come in and do environmental work in Hawaii throughout the islands. And so all of a sudden we received this grant to reforest and work with the tree canopy in low income areas in Hawaii. And we were sort of stuck, not knowing what to do. So I hit the Trailblazer group and started researching all the grant making stuff with Salesforce. And of course, the interesting thing was everybody said, absolutely go with Outbound Funds module, because you're going to have to customize it anyway, and it's going to be way better for you than anything else. And so I installed it a month ago and played with it, and then convinced the organization that that's the way they should go. Then it took us a little bit more than a month. We've hired a consultant to help us because it's such a big grant. I'm sure a few of you know him. His name is Banu, works with Terranox. But anyway, so he has been helping us, and I cleared out a sandbox, reinstalled it last week and started playing with it a lot more. Absolutely love the flows. So easy, so great, so fabulous. Terranox is going to be working on the security because we have multiple levels of security coming in and out. We have people who are applying for grants, but then we also have people oh, now I can't remember. I'm losing my words. But anyway, it's gonna be really, really fun. And I absolutely love it. I love the fact that it's so easy, and hopefully will be super easy to train our staff in helping to manage it. We have a team of 3 managing this $20 million. So hoping that the automations are just easy enough for them to go through with it all.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. Appreciate
Yeah.
that. I know, Colleen, you had your hand up. Did you want to share as well?
Sorry, I hit the wrong button.
No worries.
Yeah, so
I'm with a new nonprofit in Santa Barbara County in California. We're only 3 years old and we help families with critically ill children. So I have a health information management background, and when I joined the organization, they asked if I had any ideas on some software to use, and looking all find some on Salesforce with their free users for nonprofits up to 10 users. And I'm like, okay, this sounds great, because we, being new, we didn't have the funds yet to pay for a system yet. And I was able to get it all set up on my own until a certain point, and then we hired a consultant. But it just showed how easy it is to use, that me with just a health information management background was able to set up all of our fields and objects and all that kind of thing. And it's been great. So we use it to track the monies that go out to our families, whether it's paying their bills or giving them gift cards. So we can do, all sorts of different types of objects, I guess. I don't know all the lingo very well. But it's been fantastic. And, I'm so grateful that I found it. I was actually looking at the NPSP, right? Whatever it's called, and trying to figure that out, and worked with that for like a month. And then I couldn't get the work the way I wanted it to work. And then went on to the communities, and someone suggested OFM. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. Exactly what we need. So thank you so very much. And our couple of staff that we have love it and find it really easy to use.
Great. Thank you for sharing. That's awesome. And I think it speaks resounding, both Diana and Colleen and Caroline put in the chat too. Like, it's all about community, right? Of community recommendations, and this will help you get what you need to go. And I think that's awesome to hear. Do you want to go to the next slide, Bill? So again, Ashley and Fiona, feel free to chime in as well, but anyone else? Why did you select OFM originally? Were you looking at anything else and this one stood out, or was it community driven? And maybe also in addition to that, how long have you been using it? I'd love to hear that as well.
Sure. So I looked at Flux just to do a little bit of due diligence. We were also honestly very close to implementing the Salesforce built thing to replace Foundation Connect. They had it for 6 months, a year. It seems like they've discontinued it at this point, but we were very, very close to doing that as well. But because it was so new and there weren't a lot of users on it yet, we kind of decided we'd wait and see. And I'm really glad we did that, obviously, because it didn't work out. And Flux, I had seen Flux many years before, and it was very similar, and it just wasn't going to work really for our purposes and for what our internal users were used to, which is Salesforce. So I really wanted to stick with Salesforce. And like I said, like we're a cookie cutter foundation. Like, we don't do anything crazy. So there was no reason to like build something from scratch when something else already existed that would really work for us. And that was still customizable, and we could do things with it. So yeah, when I saw that demo, I was just like, perfect. I'm not looking anymore. This is it. Like, this is great. I'm going to use North Peak. Everything's amazing. So yeah, that's kind of how we did it. So we looked at a couple other things, but we really wanted something that was similar enough to Foundation Connect that our users could still understand it, but also like was already built out and we didn't have to do too much. It also helps that like now I don't have to manage like updates, manually updating things like that. It was a big help for that.
Cool. Awesome. How many, so have you been at what, like a couple of years now?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. No, we implemented, I think a year ago, I think we went live around August 2023, if I remember correctly. Sherry can confirm if I'm not correct about that, but I'm pretty sure.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Fiona, how about Bush Foundation?
Yeah, so Bush Foundation started the discovery process with us in 2021 and implemented in 2022. So as I said, they were using Foundation Connect, and one of the biggest complaints they had about Foundation Connect is that it had a very complex data structure, and it was forcing them to use business processes that did not match the way they worked. So they were having to create budgets or create objects and create records that didn't make sense to them, but they had to do it because Foundation Connect kind of forced that. So they were really keen to find something they wanted a system that was flexible, that would work with them and evolve with them and not force them into working a certain way. So we also looked at Submittable, we looked at SurveyMonkey Apply, we looked at Salesforce Grant Management System. And what they really liked about OFM was that, you know, it was super flexible and it could grow with them. And they had some, like, you know, they had a strong mission of enhancing their grant making, equity and inclusion, and lowering barriers to entry. And they wanted the system to be able to evolve with them as they evolved that process. So ultimately they decided on OFM with some like custom work that North Peak did for them. And they've been super happy with it. So they've been using it since 2022.
Wow, that's a great story. Thank you. Anybody else want to share like what made them select OFM and how long they've been using it?
And just to add for Bush Foundation, their needs for support from a firm that has advanced Salesforce capabilities was way higher when they were on Foundation Connect, and when the version of their Salesforce didn't really match how they wanted to work. Like they were encountering friction a lot and having to use us a lot to kind of untangle that. And when we launched them on that new Outbound Funds version of Salesforce, their need for us as like an ongoing support resource went way down, which is great for them. It's exactly what we want with our clients. And for them, like it's night and day in terms of their relationship with us. We're still around. We still provide advantage when needed, but it's intermittent as opposed to like a weekly thing.
Yeah, I mean, they've been able to
hear.
take full ownership of the system, which is a goal that we always have for our clients, you know, that we want to be able to implement for them and then let them own it and evolve with it without needing us, you know, for every single change that they want to make, which OFM has been really great for.
I
So
think
TJ, did you have something for us?
Yeah.
Oh, TJ.
I forgot I raised my hand. Yes. I don't remember the first, so Data Geeks Lab, or a consulting firm. I don't remember the first nonprofit that we rolled this out to, but we work with a lot of smaller nonprofits that, for instance, the ones that re-grant, they might be re-granting a whole bunch of money, but have a very small operating budget, and having a tool that is free but extremely robust and flexible with how they need to use it is one of the biggest reasons that they go on, because it offers this great framework with the ability to do reviews and disbursements, and the ability to track money in and money out, and give them the ability at a glance to say, oh, here's how much money is left in this fund, here's how much we've raised, and here's how much has gone out via grants, scholarships, reimbursements for student flights and computer equipment. That being able to track, especially the orgs that have more complex programmatic needs of they have scholarships, they have grants, they have regifting, they need to track like, oh, but we also reimburse for flights to school tours or computer equipment, that they can do that all in the same tool without having to do rebuilds every year. They can just spin up a new fund and say it's this type, and it's the ease of setup, because it was so well thought out, being able to be flexible, but still complex enough to be able to handle all of the various situations that they need to track those money out, and then being able to report on it is that big piece of comparing, and they love it so much. We love it so much.
Thanks, TJ. That's great. Judy, you want to take the next one?
Yes, this conversation is very near and dear to my heart. I hope most folks are aware, and if not, this is a place to learn, that part of being part of Open Source Commons back in the day is that Outbound Funds module is and always has been open source, and that piece of people being able to contribute to it and consideration to be part of the core product has always been at the heart of what it's about. So for this question, Ashley, starting to you, were you aware that it was, did anything about the fact that it was community built and open source and a group was collaborating on it? Did you know, or is that interesting to you? And, how did that factor into either how you use it or how you'd considered it?
Sure. I mean, I don't think that I really thought about it, to be honest. It's like a fun bonus, I think, and I'm very happy about it. But it's not something that when we were looking to move to something else, like I really considered. Although now that I think about it, maybe it is better that it's like this kind of collaborative living thing that doesn't rely on like one single organization that could shut in order to run. So I do appreciate that. But no, it wasn't really a big consideration.
Deanna, do you happen to know if, I know coming from, the organization, you were a little bit more aware of it, but
Yeah.
speaking of
I think speaking as a consultant, the open source aspect of it, was obviously very interesting to me. And also having Shari be on the team and knowing that we could have some influence on the OFM roadmap, so to speak, and being able to influence the product was like a big benefit for us. I'm not sure that Bush really appreciated the difference, to be honest. To them, it was just a product that we were installing. But the community aspect, I think, excited Bush. I mean, they're very community minded, and I think that they enjoyed being part of that bigger community where they could discuss like best practices and how other people were using the system and get some ideas and share some of the cool things that they were doing with the product. So I think more the community side of it was something that excited Bush. Definitely, they were not hindered by the community or open source aspect of it. So but yeah, I think the open source aspect of it was great.
I'm gonna throw one other thing in there just because I am aware of some of what Bush did. I believe we took, because it's open source, we could take the disbursement
We did.
Lightning Web component, and we were able to extend that and use like the basis that was there in the open source world and extend it, which saved our developer time. So that's just one piece of why it's great that it's open source. And Fiona, you know more about that than I do.
Yeah, they had some not to go too deep into it, some very specific requirements around how they did their disbursements and wanted to add some additional information into the disbursement grid. And actually, we put some automation in around their disbursements. So instead of our developer having to reinvent the wheel, he was able to take what you guys had built and just extend it, which worked great for Bush.
Yeah, I'd add that community and open source are aspects of this app. The values and kind of priorities that the team used as they were working on developing it included things basically like maximum accessibility and applicability to all. So it wasn't trying to pre-script, this is how you're going to manage your outbound efforts. It was, we understand you will have an outbound funds to manage. Here's a framework, and you can then use this framework with its maximum flexibility to compose your solution. And that was really where Bush was dying with Foundation Connect. It was constantly telling them, you need to work this way. And they were trying to then twist it to work the way they wanted to. And that friction was intense. And so I think like philosophically, like it hasn't really been well documented what the values are of the OFM effort, but they are there, they exist, and they are in line with like what we think is the best way to approach Salesforce, where you start with, what are your needs? How do you need to work? And then you have the solution kind of match to your way of doing business. I'm done.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I was just gonna piggyback off of what Brian said. I shared at the top of the call. This was an idea, 10 years in the making, and this was a fundamental aspect of what grant makers across the country that I was talking to were, were struggling with. Everybody had a different architecture, a different design, a system that was rigid or didn't work with their business process. And so starting this as an effort with the community was about an open framework. This shouldn't be a secret to anybody. It should be a flexible tool, and it should be open source. This should be available to anybody who wants to use it. And so again, just so excited. I just appreciate everybody sharing, but I just want to tell you, like, it was just like this idea, years ago, and it came out to be such a beautiful, lightweight, object, low code solution that is highly extensible for everybody. So anyways, I'll pass it back to the community.
Yeah, and I just want to add, as you were saying that, Bill, if I remember correctly, its first name had the word like grant in it or something that was very, and as the community was coming together to keep abstracting that, to keep it as flexible as possible, as well as to not make it anything that was regionally specific, that funds translate well no matter where, because people were coming from all different places, all different backgrounds. And so that was really, I think, set the groundwork for where it is now, and why, despite the fact of things moving around, and why we're decided to all come back together, right? Like, because that foundation of the values that were there in 2017 still exist, as evidenced on this call. Keeping in mind with the time, I'd love if folks just go ahead and throw in any thoughts and feelings, particularly those of you who've been involved with open source commons, but let's move on to the next one.
All right, I'm gonna go off camera to save some internet bandwidth here. And I know a lot of you, we've talked about a little bit already, and I've seen some stuff in the chat come through, but what's the most impactful way that you've extended OFM to meet your unique needs? I've seen some folks talk about, adding forms out to the portal where they can collect the applications or have the reviewers do their thing. Caroline talked about the cookbook that came out of one of the sprints to do some roll-ups and things like that. Anybody else, Fiona, Ashley, or anyone else have any other things, any ways that they've extended OFM to meet the needs of your organization?
I feel like I'd have to have Sherry answer that question for me.
It's a good question. I think that probably how you all do your review of reports, if you're still using that piece, that was extended for you guys. We added a screen flow because you guys do a really in-depth review of your reports.
We definitely still use that. It is the gem of the system for us.
Yeah, and I can speak to Bush. I mean, Bush have extended it significantly. The two biggest ones that come to mind are the compliance checklist tool that we built for Bush. So one thing they did like about Foundation Connect was the ability to do the OFAC checks and the tax verification checks directly from inside the system. That's something that they wanted to keep. So we actually built them a full compliance tool checklist extension. So by grant and by stage in the grant lifecycle, the compliance checklist would appear. It's actually an integration that goes out to the Treasury to do the terrorist check. It goes out and does the tax verification check, and it puts the results right back into Salesforce for them. So they don't have to leave Salesforce and go to another system and do the check and manually create the results record. It actually does all that for them from inside Salesforce. And they can customize that checklist because they have different types of grants. So for some of them, they needed tax verification, but for their fellowship grants, they didn't. So they wanted to have kind of a flexible checklist, which they use. The other thing is extending it to the portals, which I'm seeing a bunch of people in the chat are doing. So we built out like a full reviewer portal for them. They have so many applications, and their applications are extensive in terms of the amount of writing, and they have reviewers that have to read through these applications. So they really needed something where the reviewers could go in, read a bunch of applications and score them quickly, and also see any supporting documentation right in the portal. So they use a reviewer portal that gives them a list view of all the reviews assigned to them, and when they click into them, they can see the full application, they can see the attached resume that the applicant submitted, they can score interactively as they go through each section, they can save the review and come back to it and finish scoring. So like full flexibility around the reviewer portal. And we also built them a grantee portal, so their fellows can go in and see, when was the last payment I got, when can I expect the next payment, when is my next report due, can I go back and read my historical reports and see what I wrote. So they've definitely made use of the portal. They also do a mentorship portal. So yeah, they are fully leveraging the objects and the fact that you can put them in the portal. And they've like really extended that data model.
Wow, awesome. That's really cool to hear. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Anybody else want to jump? I know we're running a little short on time, but anyone else want to put anything in the chat or come off mute real quick? All right. Well, thanks everyone. I think we had one more question.
I'll say something real quick.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I guess I'm not TJ Warfield. I don't know why it thinks that's my name. I'm John. I work with TJ Warfield. But she just pointed something out to me that I thought would be worth just bringing up, that the so one of the things I really like about OFM is it doesn't force you to do anything that, like, I think somebody else put it another way in here, that if somebody could be doing a process that's slightly different, then you're not forced to do it the way that, you know, the correct quote unquote OFM way. And the thing that we did, so we have a form assembly form that submits the grant application for one client of ours, and that creates a number of roles, but you don't have to, you're not required to like create the contact that those roles are connected to. And they were concerned with a lot of duplicate contacts being created by this public form that people are, you know, submitting grant applications through. And so we allowed that, we gave them a screen flow that, as part of their data validation step, basically like walked through each of the roles on a funding request and allowed them to kind of you know, manually say, okay, this seems to match to this contact. Do you want to match this role to that person? Or like, no, just create a new one, and that kind of a thing, right? It's like a data quality verification flow. And I just bring it up like to say, like, you guys didn't force us to create a contact first, and I really appreciate that. Among a million other little things you didn't force us to do, you know.
Not forcing you to do anything was kind of the key there. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing. I think we had one more question. Do we want to take that one, or do we want to skip that one? And
it might be time to shift to like talking about what's next, or
yeah, let's do that.
Which kind of leads exactly what I was going to suggest with this question. So as we're kind of thinking forward-looking statement, no safe harbors in this group. If there's anything you want to share, like anything you're thinking about in the future, please throw it in the chat, and as well, or in the group for the next conversation.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank Ashley and Fiona for bravely stepping up to answer all these questions and seed it.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so thank you again to everybody for sharing all those unique cases, and I'm sure now this is gonna tee up very nicely what we're talking about for the future of OFM. So I see some calls already for loving to see some of this in action, and maybe doing some demos, things like that. So we do have some opportunities for next steps. We are trying to figure out what the future of this group looks like, and need your feedback. So if you're not already, hopefully if you found this meeting, you're already part of the group, but tell your friends, just invite everybody you know that could use OFM or benefit from being part of this community. Let them know about the group. If you are interested in being a little bit more intimately connected to the planning, we also meet twice monthly, and we're working on trying to plan what these next meetings look like. And so Sherry's volunteered to be the lead point person on collecting those. So if you are interested in joining us in that planning group, definitely reach out to Sherry. Her email's right there on the slide. But I do have a poll, and I can fire that up. And we're just really trying to get ideas of what people would like to get from the community, what you'd like to see at future meetings. So let me pull that up. Sorry, I have too many windows going today. So just real simple one, just so we can kind of get a quick vote. But yeah, again, your comments have already helped us. You know, they're going to help us steer exactly where we need to take this group. So if you have ideas of things that you'd like to see, things you'd like to work on as a group, challenges, things you're looking to, you know, talk to others in the community about, definitely continue to use the Trailblazer community group. Many have probably already seen. Sherry's probably the quickest one to get to those questions, but all of us are watching. And so we are trying to continue to be there to support all of you whenever you post a question there. And it's a great place to learn from each other and how people are approaching different solutions. I got a bunch of answers, so I'll give you 10 more seconds and then I'm going to close the poll. If you guys want to see what everybody voted, I'll share that back with you. Looks like demos is the most popular, which I kind of anticipated. I think we all did. It's always fun to you know, peek behind the doors and see what everybody's been building in their own organizations. The building though, I think that's another one. You know, you can see two different options there for building recipes or examples that would be easily repeatable, things that we could continue to add to the documentation that already exists. I know Sherry's involved with the DLRS team, and so I know we have a few recipes already built out in there. So we've already started some of that work thanks to that group. But we also know that there's plenty of other use cases. Again, some of the things you guys highlighted today, amazing ways to extend and build on top of the OFM data model. The stuff that Fiona shared for Bush sounds amazing, you know. So, so hopefully we can put all that together, and we'll be putting some meetings out there. So I would say definitely keep an eye on the Trailblazer community. That's where we'll be posting all of our updates about upcoming meetings, community efforts, and so we'll be back in touch there. For the rest of the time, I think it is open floor, unless anybody else on the team has anything they want to add, but we were just going to ask. Yeah, go ahead, Sherry.
I was just going to say one thing. We do have an open invitation to participate in the open source commons sprints at any time as an Outbound Funds team to come together. For those of you who don't know what open source sprints are, they happen several times a year where groups of people, it's like 100 people when it's virtual, and just about as many when it's in person, we get together and we build things that can help other people in the nonprofit and foundation space. And so most of the time, DLRS has a team there. There's a team that does a bunch of other things, but we have an open invitation that at any time we can use that time to come together and build things for the Outbound Funds community. So that might be something we do. There's a virtual one coming up here too quickly, but then there's an in-person one in November. So we might explore doing an in-person group.
And sure, November is in Chicago, correct? Yep. Okay. So if anybody is looking for Chicago in November.
And for those of us who are not super good developers, you can also create documentation and all kinds of other things. So don't be afraid to go, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that, Diana, because that is true. A lot of people don't think they have a place at a sprint, and really it's a place for everybody. We've heard that over the years. People say, oh, I don't know how to, I'm not a developer, I can't go to a sprint. It's not about that. We've done videos, we've done documentation, we've done planning, needs, you know, assessments, or, you know, requirement building, collaborate with other teams, you know, sometimes just being in the room with these other teams that are thinking of neat things. they they come to us as some kind of the trailblazers of the open source commons as being the first product out there, and said, how did you guys do this? What was your success? And the answer is you guys. Everybody here is part of the success. It was the community that did it. So again, thank you. Yeah, so we have 2 minutes. Time flew by very quickly, but if anybody has any other questions, comments, anything you want to talk about for upcoming meetings, we've got a few minutes that we can spend here. I have a couple of minutes extra. I can stay around if anybody wants to chat. So. All right. I'm gonna let y'all go with 1 minute extra today. Again, keep an eye on the Trailblazer community for any updates, and thank you again for joining us today. It was a pleasure meeting all of you.
Thank you.